Well, soon white-tailed deer will be entering the peak of breeding season, bringing a boom of activity to the fall woods. But with it comes the threat of chronic wasting disease, a contagious disease among deer that always ends in death. Bridget McClure met with the State Game Commission to find out what's being done to manage CWD, and they've got something new, Bridget.
Yeah, Jen, well, deer hunting in Pennsylvania is a cherished tradition, but as more animals are becoming infected with chronic wasting disease, the more rapidly it's spreading and threatening the deer population. And that's why the Game Commission is using a new tactic this year to try and slow and contain the disease.
Chronic wasting disease, or CWD, is specific to the deer family, which includes deer, elk, and moose. It's an abnormal prion or protein that affects the brain and nervous system, eventually resulting in death.
It was first discovered in 1967 in the state of Colorado. Here in Pennsylvania, it was first detected in 2012 in a captive facility in Adams County.
The disease can be transmitted directly through animal-to-animal contact or indirectly through contaminated food and soil. But how can you tell if a deer has the disease?
It will start showing clinical symptoms of a drooping head, salivation, and the classic symptom wasting, to where its neurologic system is shutting down and the animal basically looks emaciated.
But the Game Commission says deer infected with CWD may not show signs of infection for 12 or more months. Following the detection of CWD in both captive and wild deer, the Game Commission established Disease Management Areas, or DMAs. Chronic wasting disease was first found in DMA 1 in Adams County, which has since been eliminated, DMA 2 in Bedford, Blair, Cambria, and Fulton counties, and DMA 3 in Jefferson and Clearfield counties. Since 2012, officials say they've seen a slow progression in the number of positive cases, but the threat is still there. So, new to this season, the Game Commission is replacing the former blue barrels hunters previously used with deer head collection boxes.
Basically, what a hunter will do is he will pull a bag out, open up the bag and deposit the deer head in the bag. Basically, tie the bag firmly shut. Place the head on the bag, and then the bag is deposited in the dumpster.
If hunters cooperate and deposit their deer heads in the box where their deer was harvested, officials hope they'll be able to determine how prevalent the disease is. Every few days, the Game Commission collects those heads and picks up dead deer along the road. Wildlife biologists then extract two tissues, the lymph nodes and part of the brain stem.
Those two tissues are the tissues where the prions that cause the disease accumulate the fastest.
And record data from each deer, including where and when it was killed.
The data is just as important, or is more important, than extracting the tissue, because if the deer is positive, we need to contact a hunter and see where it was harvested.
The tissues are then sent to the Pennsylvania Veterinarian Laboratory in Harrisburg.
They'll take a very thin slice of the tissue and they'll dye it, and they'll lay it on a slide and look at it under a microscope, and that dye will show any prions that are accumulated in that tissue.
If the deer test positive, they're sent to the National Veterinarian Services Laboratory in Iowa to be confirmed. Hunters can expect their results within 4 weeks. But just as important as the Game Commission's role are the taxidermists and meat processors. Cliff Cessna has been in the taxidermy business for 42 years in Clearfield County. He says taking in deer from DMA 2 has created more precautions he now must follow.
It does cause us some problems. They can't bring them directly to us. We have to have a drop-off point where we meet them within 5 miles of the unit, cape and process, and it's a bit inconvenient. We do mount a fair number of deer from that unit each year.
Ed Pudliner has been processing deer for many years in Cambria County. He says he recommends hunters to just avoid hunting in areas where CWD has been found.
If the deer are that bad, I don't even want them in my place, you know.
To help prevent the spread of the disease, Pudliner says he must determine if the carcass is from a CWD positive area or not. If it's not, he still has procedures to follow.
When you skin it, you're supposed to wash and clean that area before you touch anybody else's deer. And if you work on your tables, you got to get that meat off, scrub the table, clean the saw. If you use your bandsaw, you use your grinder. That's got to all be cleaned and disinfected.
If the carcass is from an area where CWD has been detected, Pudliner says he must contact the Game Commission to collect the high-risk parts. But for many hunters, the concern is if their meat is safe to eat. The Game Commission says right now there's no evidence that CWD is transmissible to humans.
But it is our recommendation, if it's positive, do not take the risk and discard the meat.
Shooting a deer with CWD is not illegal. In fact, the Game Commission encourages it if you have a valid tag.
And if it does come back positive for CWD, everybody's done everybody a favor. We've got an infected deer off the landscape, the hunter's helped us out, and we've given him a replacement tag.
Now, the Game Commission hopes by the end of this season, the head collection boxes will help determine just how widespread chronic wasting disease is, but they also hope hunters understand they can't do it without your help. They say it's impossible to change a deer's patterns to help fight this disease, but hunters, they can change theirs. Reporting live, Bridget McClure, 6 News.